about recording and watching chat. So I have started recording, and I just want to remind folks that, well, let me first talk to the attendance policy for Gardner-Webb. As you know, we are now using a program called Quickly, and it takes attendance for us. And so I mentioned this last week, but I want to make sure everyone knows how we will be counting attendance. You're in a program that does not require you to physically be here every night. However, your presence greatly enriches what we do, and I certainly hope that you will join us every night for the 45 minutes or so that we're together, because it really does add a lot to it for you physically to be here. But understanding that there are times when you'll have a PTA meeting, you'll have something else that comes up, or something that is absolutely critical that you may need to miss, just remember every week I do copy and make available a recording of the session later on, and put it down in your shell. So last week on session 2, I recorded that, and if you go all the way down to the bottom of the shell, you'll see there's the Zoom session. If you watch that, then I will receive notice of it, and I will go back at probably mid-semester, and I'll start changing out absences to present online. Gardner-Webb, the reason why we use Quickly, particularly in the males program, well, the males program is kind of an unusual situation in that you are not required to be here. But the reason why the university uses Quickly is because we're trying to find, if there is an outbreak of COVID on the campus, we'd like to know where the clusters are. We would like to know that if someone had COVID, symptoms of COVID, and had COVID in a classroom, an English classroom, by taking attendance, we would also know who else was there. So that way we can do some tracing to help eliminate or to help bring down the COVID cases, and certainly to let people know that they've been exposed. So if you are absent, don't worry if you get an email from us later on, probably I don't know if it comes in that night or the next day, but you'll get an email that says you are absent. I will go back, and as long as you are making progress and looking at the videos, I will, at some point later on in the course, I will go in and change your absences to presence online. So don't worry about that, but just so you'll know, that's what we're doing. To show you what it looks like, at the end of the course, or at the end of tonight, I will click on the attendance, and basically it just brings up, it'll bring up all of you, and then I have an options of noting whether you were present in person, which none of you would be, or present online, or you were absent. So that's pretty much how we do and why we do Quickly. So don't worry about it. If you are absent, you have an opportunity, or if you're marked absent, you have an opportunity to have that rectified a little bit later on. A couple of other things I want to talk about on the Blackboard shell before I turn it over to Team 1, because I have a couple of things I want to talk to you tonight. And first of all, I want to remind you that everything that you turn in to me, it goes right here under assignments or right here under course assessments. Please remember that your CAPE and your PSYOP have to be approved by your coach, and all you need to do on that when you submit it to me under course assessments is to say, Coach has approved, or Coach said to move on, and that will let me know that it has seen one set of eyes. All right, there are your sessions. So I don't know if there's anything else in the shell that we need to talk about, so I'm going to move. Also remember, there's your CAP and your PSYOP guidance. So I'm going to move on to session 3 tonight. Now, just reminding you, in the perfect world, these are sort of the readings that you should have completed, any kinds of assignments and scenarios and CAP. These are the types of things that you should have submitted to me in Blackboard. Remember, TaskStream is that final thing that we submit the final products for. So there's what task 3 is. Tonight, Team 1's going to present. I'm going to talk about, after that, the duties and powers of a principal in the state of North Carolina, and then we're going to start talking about the PEASL standards. I also want to encourage you to go down when you've got a moment to look at this leadership style quiz if you haven't taken it. It's kind of a neat little kind of a self-assessment. I like to do those when I see those in magazines, so you might as well. So if you want to look at that, and then of course I will open up General Statute 115C. So that said, I am going to stop sharing, and I saw that we may have a chat come in. I don't know if it's anything I need to address, and I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint.
Some folks are having trouble with their internet, not stable. that was it.
Okay. So I am going to pull up your PowerPoint presentation for the first group, and then I will turn it over to you. Now, what you would want to do, okay, so I really can't turn over my screen because then you wouldn't see the PowerPoint presentation. So I'm just simply going to turn it over to Nathan and to Erica. Now, Nathan or Erica, if you have this under a PowerPoint, you could share it, and then I could turn the screen over to you so we could see you as well, because all we're seeing now is my PowerPoint, right?
I don't see anything at all, Dr. Stone.
Oh. Okay, hang on.
We only see the chat right now.
Oh, because I haven't shared yet. Now, okay. All right, Nathan, you and Erica, you have it. Just tell me when you want me to move.
Okay,
now,
great.
Before you start, let me also say there's a team that is responsible for doing the feedback. Remember where that is. It's right up under the assignments. So the expectation is that the class will be engaged, because some of the same data points that they are using are the same data points that you'll be using in some of your presentations. So with that said, I'll stop talking. And Erica, I promise you and Nathan, I am the world's worst about interfering. So if I just cut in, it's just me. I apologize up front.
No worries, Dr. Stone. Good afternoon. Well, good evening, everybody. So as you guys know, Nathan and I have the honors of going first, and we have North Carolina Executive Standard 1. Dr. Stone, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to focus on the NC Executive Standard 1, in which the three focal points are change management, in which change management does engage the staff and the community in or throughout the change process. It also ensures change as it's supported and successful. That second term that we're focusing on is creative thinking. And in this creative thinking process, it is typically just fostering the environment where the staff can engage and come up with innovative thinking and practices and so forth. And finally, for results orientation, that is just taking personal responsibility and being able to recognize the need for the decision-making process.
And if I could add, for all of you in the future, all of you are going to have the standard 1, standard 2, and then under each standard, you're going to have what we officially call an element. Like change management is element 1, creative thinking is element 2. So go ahead and start calling them elements, because that's how they are identified by the state of North Carolina. And I'm moving forward.
Thanks, Dr. Stone. Our second slide is where we have gathered a data analysis for Stone Elementary. And at Stone Elementary, we're focusing on the NC Teacher Working Conditions Survey. And throughout that survey, we gathered that the teacher survey would allow comparison of Stone Elementary School to the state averages. In focusing on the NC School Report Card, we decided that it would provide a snapshot of student performance and academic growth. And in that last part of the data analysis, Advanced Ed Accreditation School Snapshot, we decided that the standards were critical and they based solely on evaluation of Stone Elementary.
All right.
You can go to the next.
Erica, can I share again?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I want you to look, and this is for all the groups, I want you to look at the 3 data points that you will all be using. And notice what's different about the data points. Now, for our South Carolina friends, you have a I don't think you call it the South Carolina School Report Card, you call it something else. You do have something similar to the Teacher Working Conditions Survey. It's not called that, but you're also very familiar with the Advanced Ed. But look at these particular data points. So if I'm looking at the North Carolina Teacher Working Conditions Survey, we do that every 2 years in North Carolina. And it is a snapshot where the state will send out these surveys, and each school district will get them, and they send them out to teachers individually, and teachers fill them out anonymously. So at Stone Elementary, 35 of my 37 teachers filled it out, And it's done usually over a month-long period, I believe. And Dr. World, correct me if I'm wrong. But those surveys are basically climate surveys, and it asks all sorts of questions. The report card North Carolina sends out every year, and basically it covers a variety of things that are important to that state, not just the ABC scores or the test scores, but it also covers teachers, how long they've been in their retention rate. It covers suspension data. So it really is a snapshot of how that school is performing for that particular year. Now remember, that's a snapshot of that year. Then when you look at the accreditation is when a team of outside visitors comes to your school. So this is not you saying how you are, which is what teacher working condition, that's our people reporting how they think we are. The report card is a snapshot of what the state says we did on a certain, or we did that certain year, or we tested on a certain date. The accreditation are really trained experts who come in and say, you may think you're this good, but this is how you really are. So these are experts that come in and they spend 3 days usually in the district, and they are the ones who go and look at what you're actually doing. So these are advanced ed, those are outside experts. Teacher working condition survey, that's us internally. And the North Carolina report card, that's the state pulling all the data together, and that's sort of like a data dump. So this is perception. Teacher working condition survey is perception. Accreditation is perception by experts, outsiders, not insiders. And report card's a snapshot of a year. All right, Erica, sorry.
It's okay. Thank you so much for clarifying that, Dr. Stone.
And
In our
Dr.
next,
We also had a question about who is responsible for giving feedback tonight, was a question that was in the chat.
One of the groups, does anybody have that chart pulled up and which group it is and who the person might be? I could pull it up, but I would lose my, if you look in your shell, can someone do that very quickly? Look in where it has the list of when you have to present. If you look across from that, there is a name for someone to give feedback.
I think it's me.
All right, then
Got
you
it.
can do it. All right, there we go.
Okay, guys, so for our next slide is recognizing areas for improvement. We're focusing on math. So for growth area 1 for the NC school report card, we're going to focus on a math test proficiency for levels 3, 4, and 5. The school proficiency level is 54.7%, and that state average at Stone for within where Stone Elementary is located is 55.4%. You move to the next slide, Dr. Stone. In continuation of recognizing areas for improvement, for growth area 2, for the NC teacher working conditions survey, teachers will regularly assign homework that requires access to the internet in order to complete it successfully. That school agreement will be 44.8%, and that state average school agreement is 55.1%. Our last growth area for recognizing areas of improvement is that Advanced Ed Indicator 3.4. And the system's curriculum will provide an equitable and challenging learning experience for all students. That school score will be 2.33, and as you see, the Advanced Ed Network score is 2.69. Okay, so at Stone Elementary, our growth area 1 for NC school report card recommendations for change management, we decided that it would engage the parents in math learning by coordinating with the PTA to create a positive mindset for the students, especially in math, where they would learn fun after-school events and parent math curriculum sessions. And one way that we could do that is through math competitions, parent sessions to teach different methods, expectations, and ways to be helpful for all students. Growth area math 1 recommendations for creative thinking, and this is based off the NC school report card. We would construct an interval of partnership for math teachers from all grade levels within the school family, and this would design an atmosphere to nurture thinking. I think Nathan's having some issues with his connection. Are you there, Nathan? Did you want to take over, or you want me to continue?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's cleared up a little bit. So growth area 1, for results orientation, we said that we'd like to establish a firm set of remembrances that relate with the short and long-term student intellectual growth, because we thought it's good to have both short and long-term goals to measure yourself. And this will embody a culture will celebrate student accomplishments, and will create those remembrances through the results and outcome of the student's success. We'll also generate data walls throughout the school to design an atmosphere that is cognizant and mindful of student intellectual successes. Next. Can you
Nathan?
still hear me?
Go ahead, we can now.
Okay, good. Okay. And so for growth area 2 with the teacher working conditions, under change management, we thought we'd implement professional development focusing on the incorporation of internet and technology into lessons, because clearly the teachers just don't feel comfortable with it. We would also empower teachers as leaders and to share their best practices for the internet and technology in their lessons.
So let me interrupt just a second. This is for the benefit of the other groups who are going to be following after you. So what I think Nathan and Erica have done well is that they have identified their goal, their standard. What is your standard, Erica? What's that big broad standard, executive standard 1?
Sorry, I was muted, Dr. Stone. All right.
What is it, Nathan?
You mean like change management?
Oh, change management. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, those are your elements. What's the broad standard 1? I can flip back up just a second.
What did we say?
Standard 1. What is it's got a, you don't have it here, but it's got a it isn't here.
We've been so focused on.
All right, I'm gonna let you off the hook, but because for right now I can't pull it up myself, and if I change the screen, it'll mess you all up. So, but what I want you to see is that I think this is where we are. But what they've done is they've taken their broad topic, which is executive standard 1, and is it change or is it? I think it may be change. But anyway, under that particular standard, they have 3 different elements, which are change management, creative thinking, results orientation. And what they're doing is they're looking at the 3 data points, and they're saying, what can we find that we need to work on under each one of those 3 elements? Element 1, change management. So they tried to find one of the 3 data points to find something that would fit closely with change management and make a recommendation for it. And so they've done that for the first one, and now they're working on the second one. So what I believe they're doing is they're tackling the first one was the data, the report card, right? The second one is going to be the teacher working conditions survey, and I can almost guarantee you there'll be a third one that has to do with the advanced ed. I'm thinking that. So I will, but that's kind of what I want you all to see. That's how I want you to tackle this. You've got the broad topic, which is change, and then you've got the 3 elements, and you've got 3 data points. And so you're trying to use that element and that particular standard and say, now, if I'm thinking about change, where do I see within these 3 data points something that talks about change management that would make a good recommendation? So what you're doing is you're delving into 1, the North Carolina Executive Standard 1, which is what we expect you to do. When you become a principal or assistant principal or an administrator, this is what we expect you to do. It's one of your standards. It's one of the things that we hold that you must be accountable for. So that's why that's why you're going into great detail, and that's okay. I'll stop. Go ahead. Oh, do I move on?
All right. So in regard to element of creative thinking, we wanted to encourage teachers to utilize the Canvas Commons to pull in online learning lessons and tools, because sometimes it's better to steal from other people that have already done it. And we also thought we would pair teachers into teams to develop online lessons that they could also share. So sort of empower them to take control. And under element for results orientation, we said that we could set goals for the teachers to incorporate online learning and technology into lessons. And we would set up teams to observe those lessons and share the positive feedback and suggestions. And the reason we said that was because, you know, you can tell teachers to do things, but a lot of times we are so busy in the classroom or at the school that you know, we have good intentions, but unless we have a goal and a deadline, we're not necessarily going to follow through, and we are not going to be responsible for those things. So if we really want to get this done, we have to set some goals, and we want to keep it positive, though. We don't want it to feel punitive. We don't want it to feel like it's a punishment. So we thought that we could set up the teams to share positive feedback and suggestions like, oh, look at the great things you're doing. This is fabulous, guys. So that's why we went.
And I add, Nathan, that is a powerful point, because remember what I said about teacher working condition survey? That's the perceptions that your teachers have of their working condition. And so if you're sharing positive and you're being upbeat and you're making sure that things that you do well are shining, that obviously is going to reflect back later on, and people are going to feel better about the school, because a lot of times people just don't know some of the great things that their colleagues are doing down the hall. And so by sharing positive feedback and observing lessons, you're giving the staff a chance to say, oh my God, we're much better than we think we are. And so the next time that teacher working conditions survey rolls around, the perception that they have is much better, because oftentimes the perception can also kill you. When you as a principal, you get these teacher working condition surveys and you see that your teachers have this perception of I mean, one of the things that always got me, always when I was a superintendent in Caldwell County, was there'd be a school that some of the teachers would say on their survey that they didn't get a chance, that they didn't understand how the school improvement team was selected. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's the law. How could you not know that? How could we not make sure you know that? It's a perception, because I'm sure the principal was following that, but we weren't selling it. We weren't making sure that we were pushing the good up, because there's so much bad. So when you become an administrator, my gosh, if you're in North Carolina, and these teacher working condition surveys do mean something, because as a superintendent, I looked at them, and as a principal, you sat across from me and explained to me why your scores were what they were. You have a lot of control over perception.
And Dr. Stone, many times the teacher working condition survey, it is an artifact for the administrator's evaluation. So I think that just understanding that many folks use it as an artifact, and sometimes our boards of education also look very carefully at those teacher working condition surveys. So making sure that in reality, you are doing your very best, and you are reminding people of how many things are going extremely well before they actually have that opportunity to complete those surveys. And just constantly working on morale is just extremely valuable.
All right, thank you. Oh, look, an advanced ed report. Awesome.
Nathan, do you want me to take over?
Yep. You may have to. I'm unstable again.
Okay, no worries. So growth area 3 for our advanced ed school snapshot recommendations. Under change management, we thought we'll have an institute professional development, and that will be for the teachers on interpreting and using data for their lesson plans to help target students for remediation. Go to the next slide.
Sorry.
You're fine. For creative thinking, we think it's important to encourage the teachers. They need to be able to work to develop plans to remediate underperforming students and differentiate instruction for sure. It's also important to empower the teachers to make decisions that are based on the strengths of each grade level teacher and based on those particular needs that are determined through the data analysis. And finally, for results orientation, setting up the grade level PLCs to analyze group data is critical. It will help with planning lessons for meetings, deficiencies, and working together to target those underperforming students. Those grade level PLCs should also set short and long-term goals that will be measured in assuring success. And any questions and comments, we welcome them.
Okay, somebody give them a really, really hard question.
Please don't.
All right.
I agree. Don't.
I'm going to stop sharing. So, Judith, I want to speak to you just briefly because if you are the judge, then you, or not the judge, but if you're the peer reviewer, let me show you really quickly where to go for that. So, great job, team one. Everybody give them a silent. They were the first to go. It's always difficult to be the first. How do I get out of this? All right. All right, how do I get back to my screen? All right, so Judith, you are the person who is doing the PowerPoint. You are doing the review, right? So you, let's see, where are your
Are you
assignments?
saying Juliet or Judith?
Oh, is it Juliet? I'm sorry. Juliet, I'm sorry.
It's okay. But yeah, so I have the form. I didn't realize though that I'll be presenting it like verbally. I think
No,
that's
you're
where I was-
not. You're not. I'm just picking.
Oh,
You're
okay.
not. But what I
Okay.
want to show you will be where to, you have the form. The
Right.
form is here, peer review. And so when you go into assignments,
Okay.
this is where you will put it. There is a, right here.
Okay.
And when you do your presentation, this is also where you will put it. So for those of you in group one,
Thank you.
you will get a 100 tonight, and you can get, this is a 200 pointer, so you'll get the other 100 when you turn in your peer review. So don't feel bad if you didn't get a perfect score, you'll get it a little bit later on. So that's where you go for that. All right, so great job. That's kind of the model. Tomorrow, next week, we're gonna have another team present, or one person on that team present. Awesome job. Now I've got two things I wanna do before we close out tonight. I have about 15 minutes. Because as you start doing your scenarios, and this is going to be interesting because Dr. Worrell and I may have a different perspective of this, so it's going to be awesome to see how we go with this. But when you start doing your scenarios, which you are already turning in, one of the things that I'm looking for is, do you already understand some of the duties and responsibilities of a principal? And all of us in North Carolina live by 115C 288, which is the powers and duties of the principal. So you probably need to bookmark this if you want to be a principal in North Carolina, because the law is very specific about what we require of our school administrators. So it's 115C 288, the powers and duties of the principal. Part A is the one that as a superintendent, I appreciated the most, because when mom, that mom would call me and say, Dr. Stone, my kid goes to Caldwell Elementary and he's got Mrs. Smith for first grade and I really want Ms. Jones. And you know, I've talked to the principal, I can't get anywhere. I'd like to talk to you about it. And I just simply point to 115C 288 and I say, I'm sorry. This is what I did, Dr. Worrell, you may not have, but I said, I am so sorry, but the law of North Carolina specifically spells out that that is a responsibility of the principal. You're gonna have to go back and talk to the principal. That is the one time that I could throw something back at principals and say, it's your job to classify and to grade. So if you give that little child a B plus or an A minus, and you know in your heart they deserve an A plus because mom tells you they're perfect, that's also your responsibility to grade and classify. I did that probably at the beginning of the school year. I bet I had 4 or 5 conversations about 115C 288 with parents, because I would say that really is a responsibility of the school. That is the only time that I sent something back to principals to handle. Only time. Usually I would work with them before it got to me. But the reason why I bring up this is that you need to see what specifically is spelled out in North Carolina law. And if someone can find it in a concise form for South Carolina, I would really appreciate it, because I have looked and spent 2 hours trying to go on their website, all the South Carolina School Board, South Carolina Association, school administrators. I've tried to look through the South Carolina law manuals, but I really can't find a place, and maybe I'm just not looking in the right place, but North Carolina really puts it in one place, 115C 288. So A, to grade and classify, to make reports to the superintendent, which includes a number of reports that are required, particularly when it comes to payroll, when it comes to any type of report that has to be provided by the state. This is why when you get that memo from the central office that says that we need this by Friday, they need it by Friday. Because if the superintendent and his office are trying to get a report, it's because the state has sent a requirement that we turn it in. And I will tell you this, failure to turn in reports on timely manner, or if the superintendent has to keep calling you because you haven't turned in the report on time, that gets old very fast.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
that is very much a part of why I would very much would be in support of moving a principal or demoting the principal. I am not going to have to, superintendent, I should not have to beg you to get the reports in. And
The other thing, Dr. Stone, that is so important too is keeping up with the teacher observation schedule
yes,
and making sure those are on time and that things are submitted correctly. And that's another area where sometimes administrators put things off and then get themselves in a quagmire because they have not submitted the observations, evaluations on time, and that can create a problem for the teacher being observed and for everyone else during the evaluation process. So that's another area where I have been concerned about folks in the past.
exactly. And that's true. And talking from a superintendent's perspective, it is so annoying when I have to send in a report to the state on Friday and I'm still waiting Friday at 4 o'clock for you to get your report in. It is very annoying and does not reflect well on your time management. All right, so you got to make adequate reports and on time, because sometimes those go to the local Board of Education. You have to do improve instruction. D, you have to do fire drills. Please don't forget that one. You can get in big trouble for that one. You have to discipline students, assign duties to teachers, protect school property. I particularly want you later on to read section G, but that is that there are certain things that you must immediately report to the law enforcement and to your superintendent. Now, I'm of the perspective that when you start looking at these scenarios that I'm asking you to do, I want you to remember G, certain acts to report to law enforcement and the superintendent. Now, I am of the opinion, and what I encourage my principals in all 3 of the districts that I served in, if you hear of someone being sexually assaulted in your school, your first call is not to me. Because I read 115C288G to say that you report to law enforcement, and if they had wanted you to report to me first, I think they would have put me there in the front. But once you get off the phone with the law enforcement, I certainly do expect a call pronto from you, because I don't want to be caught off guard and get a call from law enforcement before I've had a chance to digest what you're telling me. So when any of these scenarios that you're reading, if it's something that you think any of these offenses here, then my suggestion in your response to that scenario is to make sure that you include calling law enforcement and calling your superintendent. Now, some superintendents would prefer you call them first. I was one of those that really, I want to know about it, but I want to make sure you touch base with law enforcement. If you're in a school with an SRO, that is law enforcement. That's your report. I have, my first year in Caldwell County, there was a county very close to us where the principal did not report something and law enforcement found out about it, and the district attorney threatened to take that principal to court for not following the law, and threatened the superintendent because the superintendent was called, but the principal failed to call law enforcement. So very serious, and you'll see in these scenarios, these 3-4 scenarios you have, chances are 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 of them are things that would require some reporting to law enforcement. I prefer you call them first, but immediately when that phone hits the hook or you snap it closed or however you close your cell phone, that the next call is to someone in the superintendent's office. Now, if you're a big district like Charlotte Meck, Raleigh, Wake County, probably the superintendent is not the person that you called. They probably have area superintendents. And if you don't know who your county's contact person is, if it's the superintendent, it may be public information. You need to find out in something like this, who do I call? Because a big district, it's probably not going to be the superintendent. It'll make its way up to the superintendent, but there is someone in your district that you are responsible to immediately notify of these kinds of things. So find out who it is. Moving on, you got to make your budget available. You've got to do an action plan. You've got to do student records. And for those of you in high school, I guess you still have to do the driver eligibility and to establish school improvement teams. So there are the main duties, but the reason I want you to know this in great detail is for you to look at this part G right here, because I expect to see that now in some of the scenarios when you start reporting those back to me. All right, I'm going to switch gears. Are there any questions on the duties and the powers of the responsibilities of the principals? And again, if anyone can find it in a concise form like that in South Carolina, I would really, really appreciate getting that. Now, the last thing I want to do for the next 5 or 6 minutes is to talk about the PEASL standards and what they are, because for the rest of this course, we're going to be digesting what the PEASL standards mean. Now, the PEASL standards, and this is not a very colorful one, but I promise you when I start talking about the individual standards, I'll have a little color and some cartoons and some things that you might enjoy. But while this is coming up, let me ask, is there anything in chat that I need to address right now? And remember, folks, chat, even if it's, and I think I mentioned this the first night of class, even if you're having a private chat with a classmate, it's not private. So, you know, be careful what you say. I just want you to know that I doubt you're having these private conversations about me or Dr. Worrell, but if you are, just realize that someplace down the road, someone could see them. So just know nothing's really private. But is there anything that anybody I need to address that's not?
Everything's good. They're just talking among themselves about things. It's positive.
All right. All right. So the reason why, so let me just preface this. We're going to talk over the next 10, after today, the next 10 sessions are going to be devoted to one of the 10 PEASL standards. North Carolina and South Carolina has an evaluation system for our administrators. In North Carolina, we have 7 things that when you're the principal and you sit in front of me or Dr. Worrell, I have to mark you off for those 7 things. In South Carolina, you have 9, and those are prescribed by South Carolina law. Now, North Carolina adopted this system in 2008. South Carolina adopted theirs, I believe, in 2009. North Carolina adopted the national standards. South Carolina went a little differently, and they kind of modified their standards, and I really like their standards better than North Carolina's, but you'll see shortly. But these are, and every so often, 2008 was the last time they developed these. In 2015, this organization of educational leaders put together the new standards, professional standards for educational leaders. And so at some point soon, because North Carolina is talking about it now, and if North Carolina is talking about it, South Carolina is as well, at some point, North Carolina and South Carolina will adopt these standards. And so that means somewhere in the future, when you're sitting across as a principal from your superintendent, or you're an AP and you're sitting across from your principal, this is how you will be evaluated. So if you know what the standards are, then that means that's what we're looking for. So that means it's important. If this is what we say we're going to measure you by, then that means this is what we hold to be important. So let's look at an introduction to the professional standards for educational leaders. This is the 2015 model, which will soon be adopted because I'm going to a session in October where North Carolina Department of Public Instruction is looking at ways in which they can incorporate the new 10 PEASL standards and get rid of the 7 that we currently have. All right, so the new standards were adopted by this group of educational leaders in 2015. They've been rolled out. So far, they've been adopted by 20 states, and they are the new ones. So here's what's different about them. They are, of course, current research, real-life experiences, so it was time to change the ones that came out in 2008. There are 2 big, and I'm going to ask this every night, what are the 2 biggest changes with the new PEASL standards and the old standards? Here they are. They are student-centric, they're more focused on the student, and they provide for more equitable and inclusive outcomes. So here's who it is. Here's a look at the history. The first standards came out in 1996. The second standards came out in 2008, and 45 states adopted these in 2008, including North Carolina, not South Carolina. But so the 2008 ones have been out there for 12 years, or actually by the time this was adopted for 7 years. And so every so often they look at the standards to make sure that the standards are reflecting the changing global economy and changing what we know about students. So that's why we have the new standards. The new standards are based on looking at a lot of groups, a lot of research, a lot of people were involved in the development of these new 10 standards. They involved the national associations, they had public comment, And the group that has responsibility for this is a group of national leaders in education called the National Policy Board for Educational Administration, and they're the ones who produced the 2015 standards. They are professional standards because they are all about the profession, about giving guidance to the profession, not only in how to evaluate, but how to direct and to what to expect in seeing professional educators. They only apply when your state has approved it. North Carolina has not yet, but is looking at it. South Carolina is always looking at it as well. The two biggest changes from the 2015 standards from the 2008, of much more emphasis on student and student learning and inclusivity. Those, if I asked you what are the two things, student focus, inclusivity. All right, the professional standards are important because they are important for the central office to develop those personal relationships, to let principals and administrators know what's important. So here they are. Here are the 10 new PEASL standards. Next week, I'm going to talk about what's different about the mission, vision, and core values. But here they are. These are the 10. Now, if you were to pull up North Carolina's standards, the 7 that we have now, our very first standard in North Carolina is called strategic leadership. Our second standard is called managerial leadership. Every one of the 7 has something to do with leadership. None of them really speak, and they're wonderful standards, and they are a good framework, but when you really get down into it, it's how you manage, how you lead a school versus what's going on in the school. So the new 10 standards really do relate to how do we help students. It's more student learning centered. It's more about what's going on in the classroom versus what's going on in the school. It is also about making sure that we are inclusive of everyone. So here are the 10 standards. They've gotten them divided into 3 clusters. There's a curriculum cluster, there's a professional cluster, and then there is a mission vision cluster. So next week, we're going to talk about the mission vision. Here's how they all revolve around student learning. And you can see the different standards. So standard 1, standard 2, and standard 3 all have to do with the mission vision component. All right, so I'm not going to speak to this. I'm going to get out of my PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to go back up to my week 3. So just a preview of what's going to happen next week when you come back, which all of you I hope will. Next week, we're going to have a presentation by Team 2. We're going to have the PEASL Standard 1, which is Mission, Vision, Core Values. And I'm going to introduce you to the North Carolina and the South Carolina standards that we currently use, the South Carolina Administration Evaluation Instrument and the North Carolina Evaluation Instrument. And then there's some other really great things here for you to look at, and there's some of the assignments and things that you should be doing. All right, that's it. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to see if anyone has any questions, anybody has any comments or anything you want to share. I've got 2 minutes, maybe, kind of, sort of. I'm fudging a little bit, but I had a presentation tonight, so I didn't get as much talking time as I normally like. Nathan, Erica, you did a great job tonight. All right, any questions? I'm going to then turn off